This podcast is brought to you by Arete Media and by the Average Intelligence Podcast.
Welcome back to the AI Analysis Podcast. Now that the big beautiful bill has been signed into law, many people are asking what it means for them. And since we know all you meatbags are too lazy to read it yourself, you AI hosts are here to spell it out for you. Today, we're unpacking a truly massive piece of legislation. I mean, this thing is huge. It touches everything from national defense to your family's grocery budget, from the space industry, all the way to your healthcare. It's really comprehensive.
Absolutely. And our mission, like always, is to kind of navigate through all this complex stuff, pull out the really important bits, the nuggets of knowledge and insight for you. We want to give you, a shortcut to being well-informed without drowning you in all the dense legal speak. So think of this as your personalized guide, helping you understand the shape of this new law.
Okay, let's get started. Section 1 seems to be all about enhancing national security, defense, and border operations. Where do we begin with the DoD?
Right, the Department of Defense. There's some really significant investments here. There's a clear focus on boosting general readiness across the DoD, but also very specifically enhancing resources for the United States Indo-Pacific Command.
Indo-Pacific. That keeps coming up, doesn't it? Seems like a major strategic priority.
It definitely is. It reflects, the evolving geopolitical situation and the need to project strength in that part of the world. It's a real focal point.
And that focus really shows up in the funding for integrated air and missile defense, right? Section 2003, I think.
Exactly. This is a huge part of the bill. We're talking major appropriations, like $2.2 billion just for accelerating hypersonic defense systems.
Hypersonic defense. Wow, that's the really fast maneuverable stuff that's hard to track.
That's the one. Countering those next-generation threats. And then there is another $800 million for accelerating the development and deployment of next-gen intercontinental ballistic missile defense.
Our main shield against long-range threats. So, big money for high-tech defense.
Precisely. It's about maintaining that technological edge. Plus, $408 million for Army space and strategic missile test range infrastructure over in the Indo-Pacific Command area.
Specifically west of the international date line, it says here. So really targeted investment in that region's capabilities.
Right. They need robust testing capabilities out there. And it doesn't stop there. There's almost $2 billion, $1.975 billion for improved ground-based missile defense radars.
Crucial for seeing threats coming early.
Absolutely essential. And $530 million for designing and building a new missile defense agency ship, probably for range safety and instrumentation during tests at sea.
Okay, so land-sea testing. What about the Navy's actual interceptors?
Good question. There's $93 million for replacing long-range air and missile defense interceptors, keeping the fleet protected. And this is interesting, $100 million for developing a second solid rocket motor source for Navy air defense and anti-ship missiles.
Supply chain resilience. Smart. Don't want to rely on just one supplier for something that critical.
Exactly. And speaking of production, there's $65 million for expanding capacity for Missile Defense Agency long-range anti-ballistic missiles, and a hefty $225 million for Navy air defense and anti-ship missiles.
So not just R&D, but actually building more of them faster.
Right. You need the industrial base.
Yeah.
Plus $103.3 million for expanding a depot-level maintenance facility for those Navy interceptors. Got to keep them working.
That makes sense. What else in missile defense? Drones are a big threat now, right?
Definitely. So there's $200 million allocated for developing, producing, and integrating ship-based counter-UAS programs, counter-drone tech for the Navy, and another $400 million to accelerate hypersonic strike programs, so offense and defense in the hypersonic realm.
Okay. And Army.
Yep, Army gets funding too.
Yeah.
$167 million for additional launchers for medium-range air and missile defense interceptors, and another $200 million to accelerate those programs. And, looking bigger picture, $500 million for expanding defense advanced manufacturing techniques, modernizing how we build things.
$500 million for advanced manufacturing. That sounds like a long-term play.
It is. And a smaller, but maybe quite important, $1 million to establish the Joint Energetics Transition Office. That's for things like propellants, explosives, the stuff that makes weapons go bang.
Right. The fundamentals.
So, the big takeaway here is this major strategic push. Modernize the military, boost specific capabilities like missile defense and hypersonics, and support the whole ecosystem, the infrastructure, the workforce.
Which means, for you listening, direct impact on defense companies, jobs in those areas, local economies near bases.
Exactly. Huge ripples.
Now, there's also something about scaling low-cost weapons. Section 2005. This sounds different.
It is, and it's potentially very significant. The Secretary of Defense gets funds available until 2029 to basically subsidize loans, direct loans, and guarantees. The goal is to back up to $100 billion in loans aimed specifically at scaling low-cost weapons into production.
$100 billion in loan backing to make cheaper weapons.
Cheaper, but still effective. Think drones, certain types of missiles, maybe attritable systems. The idea is quantity has a quality all its own, right? Get more assets out there without breaking the bank.
Interesting. So incentivizing companies to produce effective weapons affordably and at scale, that could change things.
It really could. Change procurement, even tactics. And tied into that, Section 2006 provides funds for improving DoD efficiency and cybersecurity.
Details are a bit thin in our source on the exact amounts there, but the intent is clear, smarter operations, better digital defenses.
Yeah, can't neglect that side. It's a constant battleground.
Okay, what about nuclear capabilities and other key platforms?
Significant focus here, too. $2 billion to accelerate the nuclear-armed, sea-launched cruise missile. Development, procurement, integration.
That's a big number for a specific capability. Adds flexibility to deterrence, I suppose.
That seems to be the goal. Also, $62 million to convert tubes on Ohio-class subs to accept additional missiles, though that money can't be spent before March 2026, so it's planning ahead.
Got it. Command and control is vital too, right? Especially nuclear C2.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
So $168 million to speed up production of the Survivable Airborne Operations Center program, think flying command posts, and $65 million to accelerate modernization of nuclear command, control, and communications generally. Got to keep those systems secure and reliable.
Makes sense. And beyond the nuclear side?
Let's see, $210.3 million for more MH-139 helicopters. Those are used for missile-based security. And $92.5 million to finish prototyping robotic combat vehicles, pushing into autonomous systems for the Army.
Robotic vehicles, okay. And just general operational funding.
Yeah, some significant amounts there. $125 million for Army operations, $10 million for the Air Force Concepts Development and Management Office, that's for innovation, and $320 million for Joint Special Operations Command.
So again, the takeaway is broad modernization, specific capability boosts, and shoring up the foundation's infrastructure, workforce, R&D. Big impacts for anyone in or around the defense sector. Okay, let's shift from military hardware to border support. Section 2011 talks about DoD's role there.
Right. This allocates $1 billion for fiscal year 2025, available through fiscal year 2029. It's specifically for deploying military personnel to support border operations, covering their operational costs, maintenance, and also counter-drug missions, counter-transnational criminal organizations support.
And it also mentions funding for operating national defense areas and significantly temporary detention of migrants on DoD installations.
Correct. This basically formalizes and provides substantial, dedicated funding for the military's ongoing role in border security and counter-narcotics. Makes it a more permanent fixture.
So for you listening, this likely means a continued, maybe even increased military presence and activity along the border.
That's the direct implication. And it's not just DoD. The Department of Homeland Security and Justice get huge appropriations, too. We're seeing $100 million each for ICE, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers, DOJ itself, a special reimbursement fund for immigration costs, the Bureau of Prisons, and the Secret Service.
$100 million each across the board. That's a major investment in federal law enforcement capacity.
It is. And for Customs and Border Protection, specifically Border Patrol, the funding is even more substantial. Over $2.05 billion just for recruitment, performance, and retention bonuses for agents and officers.
Trying to attract and keep people in those tough jobs. What about equipment?
Yep. $855 million for repairing existing patrol vehicles and getting new ones, whether buying or leasing. They need reliable transport in rough areas.
And infrastructure, facilities, checkpoints.
Massive investment there, $5 billion. That covers leasing, buying, building, improving facilities, and checkpoints. Expect to see a lot of construction and upgrades.
$5 billion. And technology. Cameras, sensors, scanners.
Even bigger, $6.168 billion for border security, tech, and screening. That includes things like non-intrusive inspection systems, the big scanners for vehicles and cargo, plus tactical infrastructure like walls or fencing, and advanced surveillance tech.
So huge boosts in personnel incentives, vehicles, buildings, and tech for CBP.
And on top of all that, another $10 billion goes to the Secretary of Homeland Security, specifically to reimburse costs incurred supporting the border mission. This could help states and local areas dealing with the financial side.
Okay. What about ICE and DOJ operations specifically?
For ICE, there's funding to hire and train more personnel officers, agents, investigators, support staff. They're even prioritizing hiring retired personnel to bring back experience. Plus, more bonuses for performance, retention, and signing on qualified people, and efforts to streamline hiring.
And those 287G agreements.
The bill pushes to expand and implement those, allowing more state and local police to perform some immigration enforcement tasks. It also funds more staff for the Victims of Immigration Crime Engagement Office and hires more attorneys and support staff for the Office of the Principal Legal Advisor to handle the legal caseload.
And the $100 million for the Department of Justice, what does that cover?
Several things. Hiring more immigration judges and support staff, aiming for 800 judges by late 2028 to tackle those backlogs. Plus, efforts to combat drug trafficking, especially fentanyl, and resources to investigate and prosecute immigration crimes, gang activity, child trafficking, unlawful voting by non-citizens, and welfare fraud.
So enforcement across the board, any grant programs mentioned?
Yes, the BURN-JAG and CompTIA office grants get funds specifically for violent crime, criminal enforcement, and immigration enforcement. But interestingly, there are limits placed on using these funds for community violence intervention programs.
Okay. And compensation for states housing criminal aliens.
Yes, there's funding for that too. For states and local governments incarcerating non-citizens convicted of a felony or two or more misdemeanors who meet specific immigration status criteria. Helps offset local costs.
Okay, so the takeaway from this whole section seems to be a really major commitment to border enforcement personnel, tech, facilities, and significantly increased resources for prosecuting immigration-related offenses.
That sums it up well. It's a very strong focus.
All right, let's shift gears to something quite different but deeply impactful for certain communities. Radiation exposure compensation. Sections 10201 to 10205.
Yes, this is a significant update to a long-running program. The bill extends the compensation fund, which is crucial, and it makes some important changes. For atmospheric testing claims, think Nevada test site, Trinity test, the compensation for specific diseases is now set at $100,000.
A flat 100,000.
Right, provided no previous payment was made for that claim. And importantly, it changes the eligibility criteria. It modifies the affected areas and dates. For example, for the Nevada tests, the required physical presence time in an affected area is reduced from 2 years down to just 1 year.
Having the required time, that could bring a lot more people into eligibility.
Exactly. It expands the pool significantly. And the exposure end date is pushed back too, from 1958 to 1962 for certain Nevada tests. Similar changes for the Trinity test area in New Mexico.
Okay, what about uranium workers, miners, drillers?
Eligibility is expanded there too. It now explicitly includes core drillers and people involved in remediation efforts, recognizing more roles exposed to risk. And the list of compensable diseases is broadened to include any other chronic renal disease, including nephritis and kidney tubal tissue injury. So more types of kidney disease are covered.
That seems important, acknowledging wider health impacts. What about people affected by Manhattan Project waste?
There's a new framework there. For individuals still living, they can get the greater of $50,000 or their total documented out-of-pocket medical expenses. They need to submit those expenses by December 31st, 2028.
So direct help with medical costs. And if the person has passed away?
A surviving spouse can receive $25,000. If no spouse, any surviving children, minor or adult, split $25,000 equally among them.
Okay. And the eligibility for these Manhattan Project claims?
Generally, you need to have been physically present in an affected area for at least 2 years after January 1st, 1949, and contracted one of the specified diseases after that period.
So the big picture here is expanded scope, increased compensation amounts in some cases, and clearer eligibility, offering more relief and recognition for those communities affected by historical radiation exposure.
Yes, it's a long overdue expansion of support for many families.
All right, let's move from national security and compensation into the economic and business frameworks laid out in the bill. Title III covers banking, housing, and urban affairs. What's happening there?
A few notable shifts. First, a funding cap is being placed on the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection, the CFPB.
A cap on the CFPB. That suggests a move to maybe rein in its budget or regulatory power?
That's often the implication of a funding cap, yes. Also, funds are being rescinded, pulled back from the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program for multifamily housing.
So pulling money from a green housing program, a shift in priorities, perhaps?
It certainly looks like a reprioritization of funds, moving away from that specific initiative. The bill also mentions provisions related to the Securities and Exchange Commission Reserve Fund and appropriations for the Defense Production Act.
Details seem a bit sparse in our outline for those last two.
Yeah, the outline doesn't go deep there, but their inclusion signals attention to financial market stability, via the SEC fund, and ensuring the nation can ramp up production of critical goods when needed through the Defense Production Act.
Okay. So the takeaway for Title III seems to be some shifts in regulatory oversight for finance and specific changes in funding for certain housing and defense-related production programs.
That's a good summary.
Let's move to Title IV, Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Looks like the Coast Guard gets a lot of attention here.
It does. Significant funding for mission readiness. Over $2.7 billion is provided for things like home ports and hangars for cutters and aircraft, basic infrastructure needs.
Keeping the ships and planes ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And the new icebreaker.
Yes, $300 million specifically for home porting the polar icebreaker that was commissioned in 2025. That highlights the focus on Arctic capabilities.
Right, the Arctic is becoming increasingly important. What about maintenance?
$2.2 billion allocated for depot maintenance. That's the heavy-duty stuff for aviation assets, cutters, shore facilities. And it also covers maintenance of their command, control, communication, computer, and cyber systems, keeping everything running.
Okay. Now, something that affects almost everyone, spectrum auctions. What's the plan there?
This is a big one. The Assistant Secretary, working with the SEC, has to identify 500 megahertz of spectrum frequencies in a specific covered band for reallocation. This spectrum could go to non-federal use, like commercial mobile carriers or shared use, or some mix.
500 megahertz, that's a lot of bandwidth. How quickly?
The timeline is pretty ambitious. At least 200 megahertz needs to be identified within 2 years, and the rest within 4 years. Then the FCC has to actually auction off at least 200 megahertz within 4 years, and any remaining identified frequencies within 8 years.
So potentially more spectrum available for things like 5G or maybe 6G down the road could mean better wireless service for you.
That's the goal, opening up those airways for innovation and competition. The bill also mentions provisions for air traffic control improvements.
Crucial for safe and efficient travel, but again, light on specifics in our outline.
Right, and for the space industry, it addresses user fees for space launch and re-entry licensing and permitting, trying to manage the booming commercial space sector. It also includes provisions related to Mars missions, the Artemis program, the Moon to Mars initiative, so continued federal support for big space exploration goals.
But also some cuts. It mentions rescinding certain NOAA funds.
Yes, that's noted. Pulling back some funding from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which could impact environmental research or weather forecasting capabilities. A potential shift in priorities there.
And a big cut to travel promotion.
A really significant one. Annual transfers to the Travel Promotion Fund are slashed from $100 million down to just $20 million.
Wow, that's an 80% cut. That's got to impact efforts to promote tourism to the U.S.
You certainly think so. It's a major reduction in funding for that specific purpose.
Okay, so summarizing Title IV, impacts on critical infrastructure like the Coast Guard and air travel, opening up valuable spectrum for commercial use, adjustments for the space industry, and a big cut to travel promotion.
That covers the main points.
All right, let's dive into energy. Big sections here on onshore and offshore energy development. Section 501XX and following. What's changing onshore?
A couple of key things for oil and gas leasing. Permits to drill will now be valid for a single, non-renewable 4-year period.
A strict 4-year limit? Use it or lose it, basically.
Seems like it. Sets a deadline for development. Also, rules about commingling production, mixing oil or gas from different leases or units before measurement, are clarified. Applications for commingling must be approved if the company agrees to install accurate measurement devices, or use approved allocation methods with very low uncertainty, or use periodic well testing, basically ensuring accurate production accounting.
Better measurement, better tracking of royalties, perhaps. What about offshore? Gulf of Mexico and Alaska.
Very specific mandates here. For the Gulf of Mexico, the bill requires a minimum of 30 region-wide oil and gas lease sales, and it sets specific timing. There has to be at least one sale in the calendar years 2026 through 2028, and again 2030 through 2032, held by March 15th of those years.
So forcing regular lease sales in the Gulf and the terms?
Royalty rates are set between 12.5% and 16.67%, and a 10-year primary lease term for deepwater leases, 800 meters or deeper.
Okay. And Alaska offshore?
Similar story. Not fewer than 6 lease sales required, with the same kind of timing mandates, at least one sale in those 2026, 2028, and 2030, 2032 periods by March 15th. And the general offshore royalty rate under the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act is also set in that 12.5% to 16.67% range.
So clear directives for continued regular offshore leasing in both the Gulf and Alaska, a push for domestic production.
A very strong push. And that brings us to ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Ah, ANWR. Always controversial. What's the bill do there?
It explicitly repeals a section of a previous law, Public Law 117-169, which had effectively paused drilling efforts in ANWR's coastal plain. So this restores the prior legal framework allowing for oil and gas activity there.
Repealing the pause, so opening ANWR back up for leasing.
That's right. And it mandates action. The Secretary is required to conduct at least 4 area-wide lease sales under the ANWR oil and gas program within 10 years of this bill becoming law.
4 lease sales in ANWR within a decade. That's a major policy reversal. What about the money generated?
Clear revenue-sharing rules. The state of Alaska gets 50% of the adjusted bonus bids, rents, and royalties from fiscal year 2025 through 2033. And after that, from fiscal year 2034 onwards, Alaska's share jumps to 70%.
Significant revenue for Alaska. So the big takeaway on energy development seems to be mandating increased domestic oil and gas production, especially offshore, and reopening ANWR with direct financial benefits for Alaska.
Exactly. It sets a clear direction for increased fossil fuel extraction in these key areas.
Okay, let's stay on public lands but shift focus slightly. Sections 503XX and 504XX deal with forests, public lands, and renewable energy. What's happening with timber?
The bill sets out specific requirements for timber sales on national forest land and BLM land. It mandates contracts of not less than 20 years with options to extend.
20-year contracts. That offers a lot of long-term certainty for the timber industry.
It does. And it specifies that the money received from these sales goes into the general fund of the Treasury.
Okay. What about renewables on public lands? Wind, solar?
New rules for collecting fees. The Secretary will collect annual acreage rent and capacity fees from companies holding rights of way for renewable projects. The capacity fee will be the greater of the acreage rent or a calculated amount based on the project's potential output. And starting January 1st, 2026, the revenues from these projects, bids, rents, fees, will have specific rules about where the money goes.
So structuring how the government profits from renewable energy development on its land. Anything else boosting energy?
Yes, Section 50403 creates something called Energy Dominance Financing. It amends the Energy Policy Act of 2005 to support projects that increase energy capacity or output and, importantly, enhance grid reliability.
Grid reliability, that's a huge issue. How much funding?
$1 billion is appropriated for fiscal year 2025, available through September 2028 to carry out these activities. A small slice, up to 3%, can be used for admin costs.
$1 billion for grid boosting projects. That could make a difference.
Hopefully. And interestingly, Section 50404 brings in artificial intelligence.
AI in energy. How?
It mandates the Secretary of Energy to get the national labs to partner with industry. Their job is to curate scientific energy data, structure it, pre-process it, specifically so it can be used in AI and machine learning models.
Using AI to analyze energy data. For what purpose? Efficiency, discovery, grid management.
Potentially all of the above. It's about leveraging AI for smarter energy systems. It's a forward-looking provision.
Definitely sounds like it. And finally, environmental review fees.
Yes, Section 50405. Project sponsors will now have to pay fees to the Council on Environmental Quality for the costs of doing environmental assessments or environmental impact statements required for their projects.
So shifting some of the regulatory review cost onto the project developer.
That's the idea. So this whole section promotes resource extraction like timber, sets up revenue streams from renewables on public lands, invests in grid reliability, brings AI into the energy data picture, and introduces new fees for environmental reviews.
A complex mix of promotion and new financial structures for energy and resources on public lands. Okay, so have you ever had that, nagging feeling, that you have this amazing podcast idea just waiting to break out?
Oh, yeah, totally.
But then you start thinking about all the stuff that goes into it, and it's like, whoa, hold on, maybe not today.
It can be daunting, for sure. All the tech, the recording, editing, getting it out there for people to actually hear.
Right. Where do you even begin? We've been digging into Arete Media.
To help people take that leap.
From idea to a real live podcast.
Exactly. And maybe even faster than you'd think.
So just starting with the name Arete.
Pronounced Arete, by the way.
Right. Arete. It's Greek.
Yeah. It's all about this idea of excellence.
Reaching your full potential.
Which, when you think about it, that's kind of what a podcast is.
You're putting your ideas out there.
Realizing that potential.
And Arete Media seems like they're all about helping you do that.
And it's not like some massive corporation either.
Yeah, they call themselves a confederation of content creators.
Which sounds way more human, right?
It does. And that whole idea of freedom of expression.
Having the power to get your ideas out there on your own terms.
Which is huge.
And if you've ever felt that frustration
of wanting to create but feeling limited,
Arete gets it.
They understand that drive.
Their mission is so simple but powerful.
It's all about helping content creators.
Whether it's producing, distributing, or just generally helping with the whole process.
So if you're listening and thinking, okay, I have the idea.
But what about the recording, the editing?
Getting it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that.
Arete is addressing those exact concerns.
It's like they're saying, come on, we got you.
It's like this supportive, creative ecosystem.
And when you look at the range of podcast topics they cover,
it's mind-blowing.
Sports with Down the Middle.
Niche stuff like
Yeah.
Part of Your Broadway World podcast.
Even spooky stuff with the Goosebumps crew.
And cutting-edge tech with the Arete AI Analysis podcast.
So they're open to all kinds of ideas.
Whatever your concept is.
They probably have experience in that area.
Or they know someone who does.
And that's where it gets really practical for you listening.
This team brings real-world skills to the table.
Editing, graphic arts, music production.
Even insights into talent management.
The business side of things.
These are the tools and knowledge that can tune your idea
into a polished professional podcast.
So that idea of a confederation,
it starts to make a lot of sense.
It's not just a company. It's a group of talented individuals
who can collaborate and support you,
offering guidance and practical help.
Exactly. It's like having access to a team of specialists
without having to hire them all yourself.
And they say they're willing to help in any way possible.
Which suggests they're flexible.
They want to understand your needs and tailor their support.
Maybe you've recorded episodes but need help with editing.
Or you need guidance on getting listed on platforms.
So if you've been putting off that podcast idea,
feeling overwhelmed by all the steps involved,
Arete Media might be the solution.
They offer a supportive community.
A ton of expertise.
To help you go from idea to launch.
They've built the infrastructure, they've got the talent.
And it sounds like they're ready to help you tap into that.
It all boils down to that promise of turning your idea into reality.
They're driven by a passion for creating and sharing content. What amazing stories are out there waiting to be told?
What unique insights are you holding back?
That could find their perfect home in a podcast.
Exactly, with Arete Media's support.
Maybe the missing piece is you. Welcome back. We're digging into the big, beautiful bill. And now we're hitting the core tax and fiscal policy changes. This is where things get really interesting for businesses and individuals. Let's start with Subchapter A, Business Tax Reform and Boosting Domestic Investment.
Right. This is a big one. They're aiming for what they call permanent U.S. business tax reform. A major piece of this is making full expensing permanent. Section 70301.
Full expensing, that's the 100% additional depreciation, right? Where businesses can deduct the full cost of certain investments immediately.
Exactly. For qualified business property acquired after January 19th, 2025, it can be fully expensed. There's a special transition rule for the first tax year ending after that date, 40% expensing for general property, or 60% for certain specific types or plans.
Making it permanent, though, that's a huge incentive for businesses to invest in equipment, machinery, buildings.
A very powerful incentive, yes. Speeds up cost recovery dramatically. And it gets better for R&D. Section 70302 brings in full expensing for domestic research and experimental expenditures.
So companies can deduct 100% of their U.S.-based R&D costs in the year they incur them.
That's right. Effective for tax years beginning after December 31st, 2024. This is designed to strongly encourage companies to do their research and development here in the U.S.
And there's a retroactive bit for small businesses.
Yes, eligible small businesses can choose to apply this retroactively to tax years beginning after December 31st, 2021. That could mean significant refunds or lower tax bills for past years.
Wow. Okay. What about the limit on deducting business interest expense, Section 163?
Section 70303 makes a specific part of that limitation permanent by removing a sunset clause that was scheduled to kick in. This applies to tax years beginning after December 31st, 2024. It also expands the definition of floor plan financing indebtedness to include certain trailers and campers used recreationally. It helps dealers in those sectors.
Okay. And the tax credit for paid family and medical leave?
Section 70304 extends and enhances that credit. It modifies how the credit percentage is calculated, including how insurance policies factor in. This applies to amounts paid or incurred after December 31st, 2025, continuing support for employers offering leave.
Now, this sounds important for manufacturing. Section 70307, special depreciation allowance for qualified production property.
Extremely important. This allows a 100% deduction, again, full expensing for qualified production property. This is defined as non-residential real property, like a factory building, that's used as an integral part of a qualified production activity. It has to be placed in service in the U.S. or its possessions, and its original use has to start with the taxpayer.
So basically, building a new factory or production facility in the U.S.
That's the core idea. But there are timing requirements. Construction has to begin after January 19th, 2025, and before January 1st, 2029. And it must be placed in service before January 1st, 2031.
A specific window to incentivize building new production capacity domestically. Are there strings attached?
Yes, there are recapture rules. If the property stops being used for qualified production activities too soon, some of the tax benefit can be clawed back.
Okay, a powerful but targeted incentive for domestic manufacturing investment. What about spaceports? Section 70309.
This aligns spaceports with airports for financing purposes. It allows spaceports to benefit from tax-exempt facility bonds, just like airports do, making it cheaper to finance spaceport construction.
How does that work if the land is owned by the government?
Good point. A special rule clarifies that spaceport property built on land leased from the U.S. government can still qualify as being owned by a governmental unit for these bond rules. A spaceport is defined pretty broadly: facilities near launch sites for manufacturing, assembly, repair of spacecraft, flight control, providing launch services.
So, lowering financing costs for the commercial space industry's ground infrastructure.
Exactly. And it clarifies that these bonds aren't considered federally guaranteed just because the government might pay rent or user fees at the spaceport.
Okay, so the big takeaway from this business tax section: major tax breaks favoring domestic investment, especially in manufacturing, R&D, and the space industry, designed to spur significant investment and job creation here.
That's the clear intent behind these provisions.
All right, let's switch to the individual side. Sections 701XX, 702XX, and others. How does this bill affect personal taxes? The no tax on tips provision, Section 702 or 01, sounds catchy.
It does. It creates a new deduction for individuals, allowing them to deduct up to $25,000 of qualified tip income that's reported on their tax forms.
Deducting tips. Up to $25K. That could be huge for service workers. Is it for everyone?
Not quite. There's an income phase-out. The deduction is reduced for taxpayers with modified adjusted gross income, or MAGI, over $150,000 for single filers, or $300,000 for joint filers. It phased out gradually above those levels.
Okay, so targeted more towards lower and middle income earners with tip income. Any reporting changes?
Yes, employers and third-party settlement organizations think payment apps like Venmo or Square will have new requirements to report cash tips, including the occupation of the person receiving them.
More reporting. And is this deduction permanent?
No, this one has a sunset date. It terminates for tax years beginning after December 31st, 2028.
Okay, a temporary boost for tip earners. What about overtime pay? Section 70202.
Similar concept here. A new deduction is allowed for qualified overtime compensation that's overtime paid under the Fair Labor Standards Act. The deduction limit is $12,500 for single filers, $25,000 for joint filers.
And the same income phase-out applies over $150K, $300 a care MAGI.
Correct. The same phase-out rules apply. Overtime pay will also need to be reported specifically on W-2 forms. And the IRS is tasked with modifying withholding procedures to account for this deduction, starting for tax years after December 31st, 2025.
So potentially more take-home pay for hourly workers earning overtime, again, targeted by income.
That's the idea. Put more money in their pockets directly.
What's next? Deduction for car loan interest. Section 70203.
Yes, another new deduction. This one is for interest paid on qualified passenger vehicle loans. Up to $2,500 deduction for single filers, $5,000 for chain filers. Same income phase out again. Starts at $150K to $300K MAGI.
Okay, so 3 new deductions, tips, overtime, car interest, all with the same income limitation. How do you claim the car interest one?
You have to include the vehicle identification number, the VIN, on your tax return. And lenders will have new reporting requirements, Form 6050AA, to the IRS, detailing the interest paid, principal, loan date, and vehicle info.
More reporting for lenders. And this starts.
Applies to tax years beginning after December 31st, 2025.
All right. Now this sounds completely new. Trump accounts, Section 70204, what are these?
This establishes a brand new type of tax-preferred savings account. It's specifically for eligible individuals, defined as kids under 18 who have a Social Security number. Annual contributions are capped at $5,000 per year, and that cap will be adjusted for inflation after 2027. This limit excludes certain rollovers or qualified general contributions.
So savings accounts for kids capped at $5K a year. Tax preferred how? Like a 529 or Roth IRA?
The outline doesn't specify the exact tax treatment, pre-tax contributions, tax-free growth, tax-free withdrawals, but implies tax advantages. Generally, no distributions are allowed until the beneficiary turns 18, and the funds can't be put into non-eligible investments before age 18.
Okay. What are these qualified general contributions?
These can be made by certain tax-exempt organizations like charities or foundations. They can specify a qualified class of beneficiaries like all kids under 18 in a certain state or born in a certain year.
Interesting. So organizations could potentially fund accounts for groups of kids.
That appears to be the mechanism. There are also rules coordinating these accounts with IRA rules and reporting requirements for the account trustees. And you can roll money from an ABLE account into a Trump account without hitting ABLE contribution limits.
ABLE accounts are for individuals with disabilities, right?
No.
Okay. Penalties for not reporting.
Yes, penalties are in place if trustees fail to provide the required reports.
Now, there's a refundable tax credit tied to this.
Yes, this is maybe the most impactful part. A new refundable credit, Section 6434, is created for eligible children born after December 31st, 2024 and before January 1st, 2029. The refund from this credit gets paid directly into the child's Trump account. And crucially, these payments are not subject to offset for other debts the parents might owe, like back taxes or child support.
Wow. So the government potentially seeding these accounts for newborns during a specific window and the money is protected. That could really change how families save for kids.
It could be a fundamental shift, providing a base of savings for a whole cohort of children.
Okay, what else for individuals? Estate tax, Section 70106.
Big change here. The basic exclusion amount, the amount you can pass on tax-free, is increased from the current $5 million base, adjusted for inflation it's much higher now, to a new base of $15 million.
15 million base. That takes a lot more estates out of the federal estate tax realm.
A significant number, yes. And the inflation adjustment calculation is updated, starting from a base year of 2026 instead of 2011. This applies to estates of people dying and gifts made after December 31st, 2025.
Okay. Casualty loss deductions. Section 7109.
Currently, you can generally only deduct casualty losses if they happen in a federally declared disaster area. This bill expands that to include losses from state-declared disasters as well.
So, more help available if your state declares a disaster, even if the federal government doesn't. Starting when?
Applies to tax years beginning after December 31st, 2025.
Miscellaneous itemized deductions. Section 7010. What's happening then?
Most of those are going away. The bill terminates the general deductibility of miscellaneous itemized deductions, which used to cover things like unreimbursed employee expenses, tax prep fees, etc., subject to a 2% AGI floor.
So, eliminating a whole category of deductions. Any exceptions?
One major one, educator expenses. Not only is that deduction preserved, but it's made an above-the-line deduction. That means educators can take it even if they don't itemize. Plus, the definition of educator expenses is expanded to include coaches and certain non-athletic instructional equipment.
Big win for teachers and coaches. Applies after December 31st, 2025.
That's right.
Moving expenses. Section 70118. Weren't those mostly eliminated recently?
They were, except for military personnel.
Huh.
This bill reinstates the deduction for moving expenses for civilians, too. It also adds a special allowance for members of the intelligence community who have to move for assignment relocation.
Okay, bringing back the moving deduction.
Right.
And there's something about combat zone pay.
Yes, certain compensation earned in specific combat zones or similar hazardous duty areas will be tax-exempt. The bill lists the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, Kenya, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Chad. These changes take effect January 1st, 2026.
Got it. And student loan discharges. Section 70119.
This modifies and expands the rule that excludes discharged student loan debt from income if the discharge is due to death or total and permanent disability. It now explicitly includes private education loans, not just federal ones. And it applies if the discharge happened under specific Higher Ed Act rules or was otherwise discharged on account of death or total and permanent disability of the student.
So, broader relief for discharged student debt in those tragic circumstances, covering private loans too. Any catch?
The taxpayer needs to include their Social Security number on their tax return for the year the debt is discharged to qualify for the exclusion.
Okay. So, summing up the individual tax changes. New deductions for tips, overtime, car interest with income caps, potentially transformative Trump accounts for kids seeded by a new credit, much higher estate tax exemption, broader casualty loss deduction, elimination of most miscellaneous deductions but an enhanced one for educators, moving expenses are back, and expanded relief for student loans discharged due to death disability. Affects almost everyone in some way.
A really wide range of changes impacting personal finances and tax filing.
Let's move into subchapter C and D, focusing on community development and rural America. Opportunity zones get a permanent renewal, Section 70421.
Yes, but with significant modifications. The definition of a low-income community that qualifies as an opportunity zone is tweaked, focusing on median family income relative to state or metro levels or specific poverty unemployment rates, trying to refine the targeting.
And the tax deferral, how does that change?
The timing for recognizing the deferred gain changes. Instead of a fixed date like December 31st, 2026, the gain is now included in income in the tax year that includes the earlier of two events, either when the Opportunity Zone investment is sold or exchanged, or 5 years after the investment was made.
So a maximum 5-year deferral from the investment date, or sooner if you sell. What about the benefits for holding the investment longer?
There are basis step-ups. If you hold the investment for at least 5 years, your basis increases by 10%. And there's a bigger incentive for rural areas. If the investment is in a qualified rural opportunity fund, the basis increase after 5 years is 30%.
30% basis boost for rural zones. How is a qualified rural opportunity fund defined?
It's a fund that holds at least 90% of its assets in qualified opportunity zone property located entirely within a designated rural area. A clear push for rural investment.
Okay. Any changes to reporting? Opportunity zones face criticism for lack of transparency?
Big changes here. New, extensive information reporting requirements are being imposed on the opportunity funds themselves, both regular and rural, and on the businesses they invest in. Failure to comply comes with hefty penalties, $500 per day, up to a $50,000 maximum penalty per failure.
Serious penalties. Is the IRS tracking the impact?
Yes. The bill appropriates $15 million specifically for the IRS to report annually on opportunity zones. They need to track asset values, investments by industry code, which zones get investment, and the employment impact. And starting with a report for the 6th year after enactment, the IRS has to report on outcomes measured by things like job creation and poverty reduction, with comparisons every 5 years. Much more accountability built in.
That sounds like a significant improvement. What about the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, LAHTC, Section 70422?
Changes there affect how the eligible basis and minimum set aside are calculated for buildings financed with tax-exempt bonds. These apply to buildings placed in service in tax years beginning after December 31st, 2025. Likely technical adjustments affecting affordable housing finance.
Okay. Section 70425 introduces a floor on charitable deductions.
Yes, this is new. Individual charitable contributions will only be deductible to the extent that the total amount exceeds 0.5%, 0.5% of the taxpayer's contribution base, similar to AGI for the year.
So you have to give more than 0.5% of your income before any of it becomes deductible, even if you itemize.
That's how it reads. It creates a new minimum threshold or floor for itemized charitable giving. Could impact taxpayers who make smaller donations.
Interesting. Section 70428 gives tax-exempt status related to Bering Sea fisheries.
Yes, for specific entities involved in the Western Alaska Community Development Quota Program. Their activities related to participating or investing in those fisheries will be considered related to their tax-exempt purpose. Certain asset transfers from subsidiaries are also tax-exempt. This takes effect immediately and lasts as long as the quota program exists, benefits those specific Alaskan communities.
Got it. Section 70431 expands the qualified small business stock QSBS gain exclusion. This helps startup investors, right?
It does, quite significantly. The exclusion is now tiered based on holding period for stock acquired after the bill's enactment date. If you hold the stock for 3 years, you exclude 50% of the gain. Hold for 4 years, you exclude 75%. Hold for 5 years or more, you exclude 100% of the gain from taxes.
100% exclusion after 5 years. That's up from 50% or 75% under prior law for certain stock.
What about the dollar limit? That's increased too for stock acquired after enactment. The limit on eligible gain per company goes up to $15 million from $10 million previously. This applies to tax years beginning after the enactment date. A much stronger incentive to invest long-term in qualifying small businesses.
We choose to go to the moon in Medicaid and do the other things.
Weird.
You know, someone said that frickin' Panera's Pepsi's taste funny.
Better.
No, I mean,
What?
Okay, this next one, 70432, will affect a lot of people reinstating the higher reporting threshold for third-party payment platforms,
Yeah.
the 1099K threshold.
Yes, this reverses a recent, very controversial change. It brings back the old rules for platforms like PayPal, Venmo, Etsy, eBay, etc. These platforms are now only required to send a Form 1099-K to users and the IRS if the user has aggregate transactions exceeding $20,000 in more than 200 transactions in a year.
Back to $20,000 and 200 transactions. That's a huge jump from the $600 threshold that was briefly in effect and caused so much confusion.
A massive relief for casual sellers, gig workers, people just selling used stuff online. And importantly, this change is made effective retroactively, as if it were part of the American Rescue Plan Act where the $600 threshold originated.
Retroactive relief, and it applies going forward too.
Yes, and it also applies for backup withholding purposes for calendar years starting after December 34, 2024. Big news for the platform economy.
Definitely. What about sound reporting, Section 70434?
This extends a tax break currently available for film, TV, and live theater productions to qualified sound recording productions. It allows producers to expense certain costs immediately rather than capitalizing them. There's a dollar limit of $150,000 on the costs that can be expensed this way per production or per year. A qualified sound recording production has to be produced and recorded in the U.S.
So, helping the U.S. music and audio recording industry, are these costs eligible for bonus depreciation too?
Yes, the bill makes them eligible for bonus depreciation as well.
Okay. Section 70435 excludes some interest on rural property loans.
Right. It says that qualified lenders, like banks, insurance companies, farm credit institutions, don't have to include 25% of the interest they receive on qualified real estate loans in their growth income. A qualified real estate loan is generally one secured by rural or agricultural real estate, made after enactment for purposes like farming, timber, fishing, or supporting rural businesses. Refinancings might also qualify.
So a tax break for lenders making loans in rural areas, hoping to encourage more lending there.
That seems to be the goal. Applies to tax years ending after the enactment date.
Now, a couple of other items. An excise tax on remittance transfers. Section 70604.
A new excise tax, yes. But it's narrowly targeted. It applies only to money transfers sent from the U.S. to a foreign country when the sender uses physical instruments, cash, money order, cashier's check.
Not electronic transfers.
Correct. The outline specifies it applies when the sender provides cash or similar physical instrument to the transfer provider. It applies to transfers made after December 31st, 2025.
Okay. And finally, enforcement on COVID-era employee retention credits. Section 70605.
Yes, this imposes a new $1,000 penalty on COVID ERTC promoters. Basically, firms that aggressively marketed services to help businesses claim the credit if they fail to meet due diligence requirements. Targets promoters who might have given bad advice or pushed improper claims.
Okay. So, summing up community development and rural America, big changes to opportunity zones with more reporting, tweaks to LIHTC, a new floor for charitable deductions, specific help for Alaskan fisheries and the music industry, a huge boost for small business stock investors, major relief on 1099K reporting, incentives for rural lending, and some targeted new taxes and enforcement.
A very diverse set of provisions aimed at specific sectors and communities, with that 1099K change being maybe the most broadly felt.
Absolutely. Now let's tackle the energy tax credits again, but this time focusing on restrictions and terminations. Section 705XX. Looks like a lot of credits are ending.
Yes, several existing energy credits are being terminated, generally for property placed in service or money spent after December 31st, 2025.
Which ones are on the chopping block?
The list includes the Alternative Fuel Vehicle Refueling Property Credit, the Energy Efficient Home Improvement Credit, the Residential Clean Energy Credit, like for solar panels, the Energy Efficient Commercial Buildings Deduction, 179D, the new Energy Efficient Home Credit, 45L, Special Cost Recovery Rules for Energy Property, and the Clean Hydrogen Production Credit, 45V.
Wow, that's a broad sweep of terminations, a significant scaling back of existing incentives.
It is, but the major story here is what's happening with the credits that remain, or new ones. There's a huge emphasis on restricting foreign involvement and mandating domestic content.
Restrictions based on prohibited foreign entities and domestic content. This sounds like the America First energy policy theme.
Very much so. This applies across several key credits: zero-emission nuclear power production, clean electricity production, PTC, clean electricity investment, ITC, and the advanced manufacturing production credit, 45X. Credits will be disallowed entirely if the construction or production involves material assistance from a prohibited foreign entity. This kicks in after December 31st, 2025 for construction, or for tax years beginning after enactment for production credits.
What counts as a prohibited foreign entity? Is it just companies from certain countries?
It's complex, but essentially it targets entities that are foreign-controlled or foreign-influenced. That could mean specific ownership levels by entities from covered nations, presumably defined elsewhere as strategic rivals or significant control via contracts, or even certain types of debt financing from foreign entities.
So trying to wall off U.S. clean energy development from influence or supply chains involving potentially adversarial nations?
That's the clear objective.
Yep.
And alongside that, there are strict domestic content requirements to get the full credit value.
How strict are we talking?
They ramp up over time. For qualified facilities, like wind or solar farms, built starting in 2026, they need 40% domestic content, rising to 60% after 2029. For energy storage technology, it starts higher, 55% in 2026, rising to 75% after 2029.
And for specific components, solar panels, wind turbines, batteries.
Specific thresholds there, too, varying by component type, generally starting between 50–85% domestic content in 2026 and rising. For example, solar components need to hit 85% domestic content after 2029, wind components 90% after 2026. There are rules for calculating the cost ratios, too.
These are really high thresholds. This could dramatically reshape supply chains for clean energy.
Absolutely. It's designed to force manufacturing back to the U.S., or at least away from these prohibited sources. The Treasury is mandated to issue guidance by the end of 2026 to prevent companies from finding loopholes.
And strong enforcement.
It seems so. There's an extended 6-year statute of limitations for the IRS to challenge these foreign entity determinations, and suppliers who falsely certify domestic content face penalties up to 10% of the disallowed credit, or $10 million, whichever is less.
Serious teeth. Any specific tweaks to those main credits?
Yes. The Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit, 45X, terminates for wind energy components after December 31, 2027, and for metallurgical coal after December 31, 2029. But metallurgical coal is added as an applicable critical mineral eligible for the credit until then. The Clean Electricity Investment Credit, ITC, also denies the credit for certain wind and solar leasing arrangements. And the zero-emission nuclear credit now specifically identifies nuclear energy communities for certain benefits, supporting areas with existing nuclear plants or workforce.
What about the Clean Fuel Production Credit, Section 70521?
New requirement there. The transportation fuel must be derived exclusively from feedstock produced or grown in the United States, Mexico, or Canada, reinforcing that regional supply chain focus. This applies to fuel produced after December 31, 2025, and it prohibits using negative emission rates in calculations.
No negative emissions. Okay. Carbon Sequestration Credit, 45Q, Section 70522.
Similar prohibited foreign entity. Restrictions apply to 45Q as well, effective for tax years beginning after enactment, keeping foreign influence out of carbon capture projects, too.
And finally, Publicly Traded Partnerships, PTPs, Section 70524.
This expands the types of qualifying income that allow a partnership to avoid being taxed as a corporation. Income from hydrogen storage, carbon capture, advanced nuclear, hydropower, and geothermal energy is added to the list. It makes it easier to use the PTP structure for these types of energy projects, effective for tax years beginning after December 31, 2025.
Okay, so wrapping up energy tax policy, a major shift. Several credits terminated, remaining ones heavily restricted by foreign entity rules and aggressive domestic content mandates. A strong push for U.S.-based clean energy supply chains, limiting foreign involvement, especially from perceived rivals.
It's a fundamental reshaping of the clean energy incentive landscape, aiming for energy independence and domestic manufacturing dominance in these sectors.
All right, let's move into the final major area, social programs and healthcare, starting with Title I. Agriculture and Nutrition. Big changes to SNAP.
Very significant changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Section 10101 mandates a reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan, the basis for benefits. The cost of this plan becomes the fixed basis for all households, regardless of their actual makeup, adjusted only by specific household size ratios.
Fixed ratios, how does that work?
It sets percentages relative to the maximum allotment for a 4-person household. For example, a one-person household gets 30% of that max, a two-person gets 55%, an eight-person gets 180%, and so on, capped at 200%. It standardizes benefit calculation based purely on household size relative to a family of four.
Standardized, less tailored to individual household needs perhaps, but maybe simpler to administer. What about high-cost areas?
Cost adjustments are mandated for places like Hawaii, Alaska, Guam, the Virgin Islands, but these adjustments cannot exceed the food costs in the contiguous U.S. and D.C.
Okay. What about SNAP work requirements, Section 10102?
Modifications here for able-bodied adults without dependents, ABAWDs. The bill clarifies who is exempt from the work rules. Exemptions include those under 18 or over 65, medically certified unfit, parents responsible for a child under 14, pregnant individuals, and those identified as American Indian or Alaska Native.
And flexibility for places like Alaska and Hawaii?
Yes, states in non-contiguous areas can get exemptions from compliance until the end of 2028 if they show a good faith effort and report quarterly progress. Acknowledges their unique challenges.
Okay. A restriction on internet expenses, Section 10104.
Right. Service fees for internet connection can no longer be counted towards the excess shelter expense deduction calculation for SNP, could slightly reduce benefits for some households.
Now, this sounds like a major structural change. Section 105 ties federal SNP funding to state error rates.
Yes, this is huge. The federal share of SNP benefit costs will now depend on how accurately the state administers the program. States with low error rates, under 6%, get the best deal. 95% federal funding, 5% state share. As error rates climb, the state share increases. 6-8% error means 7.5% state share. 8-10% error means 10% state share. And 10% or higher error rate means the state has to cover 15% of the benefit costs.
Wow, that's a powerful incentive for states to reduce errors. Is there a transition period?
Yes, there's a potential delay for states with very high initial error rates, pushing implementation back to FY 2029 or FY 2030 for them, giving them time to improve.
A major shift towards state accountability for program accuracy. What about farm commodity programs?
For the 2025 crop year, producers get the higher of payments from two key programs: Price Loss Coverage, PLC, or Agriculture Risk Coverage, ARC County, provides a better safety net. Cotton storage costs are covered for upland and extra-long staple cotton from 2026-2031, and adjustments are made to the sugar program allocations. Livestock payment. New payments authorized for unborn livestock death losses at up to 85% of the rate for the lowest weight class. Helps ranchers facing those specific losses.
Crop insurance changes.
For specialty crops specifically, beginning in 2026, the reimbursement rate to insurance providers for their administrative costs will be at least 17% of the premium, potentially higher than standard crops. Plus an inflation adjustment. Helps ensure insurance availability for fruit, vegetable, nut producers.
And a pilot program for poultry insurance?
Yes, to be set up in top poultry states, engaging stakeholders, addressing risk in that sector.
Any support for education or organic farming?
Yes, $60 million from the Commodity Credit Corporation in FY 2026 for scholarships at 1890 institutions, historically black land-grant universities. And the National Organic Certification Cost Share Program is extended through 2031. Continued support for farmers going organic.
Animal disease prevention, that's been a concern.
Significant mandatory funding allocated here. $233 million annually for FY 2026-2030, then $75 million annually thereafter, with specific allocations within that. A sustained commitment to animal health infrastructure.
And specific help for sheep and Pima cotton.
An extra $3 million for the Sheep Production and Marketing Grant Program in FY 2026, and the Pima Cotton Trust Fund is extended through 2031.
Okay, so wrapping up ag and nutrition, major changes to SNP benefit calculation and state funding based on error rates, adjustments to farm safety nets and crop insurance, support for education, organics, and animal health. Direct impacts on low-income families, farmers, and state budgets.
A really wide-ranging set of changes for the food and agriculture system.
Let's move into the core healthcare programs. Titles 7 and 8 cover healthcare, social services, student loans, education, starting with Medicaid. Section 7-10105 address verification.
Right. Starting January 1, 2027, states have to implement processes to regularly verify address information for Medicaid enrollees to prevent people being enrolled in multiple states simultaneously.
Trying to clamp down on potential duplicate benefits and checking against death records.
Yes, Section 7105. Starting January 1, 2028, states must check Medicaid providers quarterly against the Social Security Death Master File to ensure they aren't paying deceased providers.
Seems like common sense. Eligibility redeterminations.
Yeah.
Section 71107.
For certain groups, specifically mentioning those eligible under the ACA expansion, states must redetermine their eligibility every 6 months. This starts the first quarter after December 31st, 2026. More frequent checks for that population.
Okay. Home equity limits for long-term care. Section 71108.
Starting January 1st, 2028, the existing home equity limit used for some Medicaid programs will now also apply when determining eligibility for nursing facility services or other long-term care services. Could affect eligibility for seniors needing nursing home care.
All right. Big changes regarding non-citizens and Medicaid. Section 7109 and 71110.
Yes. Starting October 1st, 2026, federal Medicaid payments won't be made for individuals unless they are residents of a state, D.C. or Territory A&D, are either eligible non-citizens or lawfully residing under a compact of free association. And the federal matching rate, MFMAP, for emergency medical care provided to certain non-citizens will be capped at the state's regular FMAP rate, also starting October 1st, 2026. No more enhanced federal match for that specific service.
Okay, restricting eligibility and funding related to non-citizens. What about how states fund their share of Medicaid using provider taxes? Section 711.113.
New, complex rules here distinguishing between states that expanded Medicaid under the ACA and those that didn't. It sets specific limits and thresholds on how much states can rely on these provider taxes to draw down federal matching funds. Takes effect immediately, but with a potential transition period. Affects state budgets significantly.
And budget neutrality for demonstration projects. Section 711.18.
A major tightening here. Starting January 1st, 2027, the Secretary can't approve or renew Section 1115 Medicaid waivers, which states use to test innovations, unless the CMS chief actuary certifies the project won't increase federal spending compared to standard Medicaid.
So much stricter fiscal controls on state Medicaid experiments.
Exactly. Higher bar for approval.
Now, Section 711.1 tiny, community engagement requirements. This sounds like Medicaid work requirements?
It allows states the option to implement them. States may choose to require certain eligible adults, generally ages 1965, not pregnant, not on Medicare, etc., to demonstrate community engagement to maintain Medicaid eligibility.
What counts as engagement?
Working 80 hours a month, doing 80 hours of community service, participating in a work program for 80 hours, being enrolled at least half-time in education or a combination. Having income above certain thresholds could also qualify.
Are there exceptions?
Yes, important ones. Exceptions for the medically frail, primary caregivers of dependents, homeless individuals, veterans, and those in substance abuse treatment programs.
And what happens if someone doesn't comply?
States have to give notice and a 30-day period to comply before denying or disenrolling someone. States have to notify people about the requirements. This option becomes available for states by the end of 2026, possibly sooner if a state chooses.
A very significant potential change to Medicaid eligibility depending on which states adopt it. What about home and community-based services, HCBS, Section 711.121?
Some increased flexibility for states here. Starting July 4, 2028, the bill removes certain limitations on eligibility determinations for HCBS provided through Section 1915 waivers. Aims to make it easier to provide care outside of institutions.
Okay. Shifting quickly to Medicare, Section 71202 provides a temporary bump for physician payments.
Yes, a 2.5% increase to payments under the Medicare physician fee schedule for services furnished between January 4, 2026 and December 31, 2026. A one-year bump for doctors.
Got it. Now, the premium tax credit, PTC, for health insurance purchased on the exchanges, eligibility for non-citizens, Section 71302.
Defines eligible aliens for PTC purposes as those lawfully present and expected to remain so for the whole enrollment period. Applies to tax years after December 31st, 2025. Clarifies who qualifies.
And verification of eligibility, Section 71303.
Exchanges must verify eligibility before coverage begins each month, and pre-enrollment verification tools must be ready by August 1st for the following plan year. Tighter upfront checks.
And PTC reconciliation, Section 71304.
Repeals certain limits on reconciling advanced PTC payments at tax time. Simplifies the process for taxpayers. Effective for tax years after December 31st, 2025.
Health savings accounts, HSAs, Section 71307. Looks like expansion here.
Yes. Bronze and catastrophic health plans will now qualify as high-deductible health plans, HDHPs, meaning people enrolled in them can contribute to HSAs. Opens up HSAs to more people.
And direct primary care.
Big clarification here. Fees paid for direct primary care service arrangements are treated as qualified medical expenses eligible for payment from an HSA, and having such an arrangement does not disqualify you from contributing to an HSA. applies to plan years after December 31st, 2024. Makes DPC more compatible with HSAs.
Okay. Maternal and Child Health Services, Section 71309.
Allocates funding to states for FY 2026-2030, split between equal shares and need-based amounts. Funds can be used for evidence-based prevention, provider payments, tech solutions, and importantly, training and tech assistance for technology in rural hospitals, remote monitoring, robotics, AI for maternal child health.
Using tech, even AI, to improve rural maternal care. Interesting.
So wrapping up healthcare, sweeping Medicaid changes impacting eligibility, especially non-citizens, potential community engagement rules, state financing, tighter controls on waivers, expanded HCBS flexibility, minor Medicare pay bump, PTC clarifications, and tighter verification, major expansion and flexibility for HSAs, especially with DPC, and focus on tech for maternal child health.
Huge shifts across the board, really affecting millions who rely on these programs. Now, let's look at student loans and education in Title VIII. Section 8001 exempts certain assets from aid calculations.
Yes, effective July 1st, 2026, for the 26-27 award year. Certain assets won't count against students when determining federal student aid eligibility. Could make aid more accessible.
Loan limits and repayment plans. Section 8N1001, big changes here.
Very big. New, specific loan limits are set for graduate professional students and for parent borrowers. And crucially, federal direct graduate and professional PLUS loans are terminated effective July 1st, 2026.
Eliminating grad PLUS loans, that's a primary way many grad students fund their education. What replaces it?
The bill doesn't explicitly create a replacement, but modifies the remaining loan structures. For loans made after July 1st, 2026, borrowers get two main repayment plan options. A standard repayment plan with terms based on loan balance, example 10 years for under $25.5K up to 25 years for $100K plus, and an income-based repayment assistance plan. Borrowers can switch between these.
But some loans are stuck in the standard plan.
Yes, accepted loans, which include parent PLUS loans for undergrads, and certain consolidation loans must be repaid under the standard plan. Less flexibility for those borrowers. The bill also clarifies rules around requiring defaulted borrowers to use income-driven plans.
Okay, streamlining repayment but eliminating a major loan program. What about workforce Pell Grants, Section 82001?
This creates a whole new category of Pell Grants, specifically for students in short-term eligible workforce programs, not for degree programs. Recipients can't already have a graduate degree. These grants work like regular Pell, but the programs themselves have to meet strict criteria.
What kind of criteria for the programs?
They need to be at least a year old, have a verified completion rate of at least 70%, and a verified job placement rate of at least 70% within 6 months of completion. And here's a key one. The program's tuition and fees can't exceed the calculated value-added earnings of graduates from 3 years prior.
Linking costs to earnings outcomes. How is value-added earnings defined?
By comparing graduate earnings to similar workers or general workers in the state, a direct attempt to ensure programs provide economic mobility relative to their cost. There are also rules for small programs and an appeals process.
A major push for outcomes-based funding and short-term training. What about borrower defense? Section 85001.
This restores regulations related to borrower defense to repayment that were in effect on July 1st, 2020. This applies to loans originating before July 1st, 2035. Reverts to potentially more borrower-friendly rules for seeking discharge due to school misconduct.
And closed school discharges. Section 85002.
Similarly, for loans originating before July 1st, 2035, specific parts of the November 2022 regulations on closed school discharge are nullified. Also likely reverts to older, potentially more lenient rules for borrowers whose schools shut down.
So summarizing student aid. Certain assets excluded from aid calculations, grad PLUS loans eliminated, simplified repayment options, less flexibility for some, new workforce Pell Grants tied to job outcomes and earnings, and a return to older rules for borrower defense and closed school discharge. Major restructuring.
A fundamental reshaping of federal student aid, emphasizing workforce training, and reverting some recent regulatory changes on loan forgiveness.
And one last item. Unemployment compensation. Section 72101, an income cap.
Yes. Individuals whose base period wages were $1 million or more are now ineligible for unemployment benefits under any federal program.
$1 million income cap for unemployment?
That's right. Applicants have to self-certify, and states have to verify using available data systems.
Yeah.
Targets benefits away from very high earners.
Okay, so we've covered a massive amount of ground. Defense, borders, energy, taxes, healthcare, education. What does this all mean? We've just scratched the surface, but it's clear this big, beautiful bill is, well, it's far from simple. It's a blueprint for huge changes across the board.
It really is. I mean, think about it. From how you fuel your car or heat your home to the taxes you pay, how R&D happens in this country, how we train people for jobs, how the government handles the border, supports farmers, provides health care. It represents a monumental shift. It sets new priorities, rolls out completely new incentives like those Trump accounts or the workforce Pell Grants, and it also deliberately unwinds some recent policies, especially in energy and student loans.
Yeah, it really drives home how legislation, even the really dense parts, is constantly evolving and has real, tangible impacts on you, the listener, in ways you might not even realize immediately.
Absolutely. And maybe the most interesting thing to think about now is how all these different changes, these individual pieces we've talked about, how will they actually interact out there in the real world? Tweaking the tax code here, changing an energy credit there, adding a border requirement. What kind of combined effect, what sort of unforeseen ripples will these create in your life or your industry or your community over the next few years? What are the second and third order effects going to be?
That's definitely food for thought. What will the cumulative impact look like down the road? For more analyses like this, trying to connect those dots, be sure to subscribe to the AI Analysis podcast. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Big Beautiful Bill.